"You'll get all of us tonight," the Korean MAFIA triplets told their young virgin African wife. The champagne glass shattered against the marble floor, and Muna's heart stopped. She hadn't meant to drop it. The crystal had simply slipped from her trembling fingers as three pairs of identical dark eyes locked onto her from across the penthouse suite. The Kim triplets, Dae, Min, and Jean, stood like predators who'd just caught the scent of prey, and she was completely, utterly alone with them. This wasn't how her life was supposed to turn out. 6 months ago, Muna had been a 22-year-old nursing student in Nairobi, living with her grandmother in a modest apartment near the university, dreaming of nothing more complicated than passing her exams and maybe, one day, opening a small clinic in her hometown. She'd been innocent then, naive to the darker corners of the world where power and money twisted everything into something unrecognizable. She believed in fairy tales and happy endings, in love that conquered all obstacles. She'd believed in safety. Now, standing in a Seoul penthouse that cost more than her entire neighborhood back home, wearing a white silk nightgown she hadn't chosen, purchased by men she barely knew, Muna understood that fairy tales were lies told to little girls to keep them compliant. The real world was sharp edges and dangerous bargains, and she'd walked straight into the most dangerous bargain of all. "Don't move," Dae said, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. He was the eldest by 7 minutes, the leader, the one who always spoke first. His Korean accent wrapped around the English words with an authority that made her skin prickle. "You'll cut yourself." Muna froze, her bare feet inches from the scattered shards of crystal. Her breath came quick and shallow, making her chest rise and fall beneath the thin silk. She could feel their eyes on her, studying every movement, every reaction. They'd been watching her like this since the wedding ceremony 3 days ago, a ceremony that had bound her to all three of them in ways that still made her head spin. Min moved first, crossing the distance between them with the fluid grace of a dancer or a fighter. Probably both. He knelt at her feet, his designer suit probably costing more than her entire education, and began carefully picking up the larger pieces of glass. His hands were steady, elegant, marked with scars she'd noticed during the ceremony but hadn't dared to ask about. "I'm sorry," Muna whispered, her Swahili accent thickening with stress. "I didn't mean to." "We know," Jean interrupted, appearing at her other side so suddenly she gasped. The youngest triplet, though only by minutes, had a way of moving that unnerved her. Too quiet. Too fast. Like a shadow given human form. "You're scared. We can smell it on you." Muna's hands clenched into fists at her sides. "I'm not scared." All three of them laughed, and the sound raised goosebumps on her arms. It wasn't cruel laughter, but it wasn't kind either. It was knowing. Possessive. The laugh of men who understood they held all the power and found her defiance adorable rather than threatening. "Liar," Dae said, circling around her like a wolf. She could feel the heat of his body as he stopped behind her, close enough that his breath stirred the tight coils of her natural hair, which she'd worn in a short, cropped style that emphasized the elegant length of her neck. "Your pulse is racing. We can see it right here." His finger touched the side of her throat, and Muna jerked away like she'd been burned. The movement sent her stumbling backward, straight into Jin's chest. His arms came around her waist, steadying her, holding her, and for a moment she was trapped between them, Min still kneeling at her feet, Jin's hand spanning her waist from behind, and Dae watching it all with eyes that held something dark and hungry. "Let me go," Muna demanded, trying to inject steel into her voice. Her grandmother had always said she had the spirit of a lioness, but right now she felt more like a gazelle surrounded by predators. "Why?" Jean murmured against her ear, his lips brushing the sensitive skin. "You're our wife. You belong to us now. All of us." The words sent ice and fire through her veins in equal measure. Wife. The word felt impossible, surreal, like something from a nightmare she couldn't wake from. How had this happened? How had her life spiraled so completely out of control? The answer, like most disasters, had started small. Alone. Her grandmother's medical bills after the stroke had been catastrophic, far beyond anything Muna's part-time job at the hospital could cover. She'd been desperate, drowning in debt, watching the only family she had left deteriorate while doctors talked about expensive treatments they couldn't afford. Then her friend Amara had mentioned a lending service that catered to international students, no questions asked, reasonable rates. It had seemed like a miracle. It had been a trap. The loan hadn't come from a legitimate company. It had come from the Kim family empire, one of Seoul's most powerful criminal organizations, disguised behind layers of legitimate business fronts. And when Muna couldn't make the payments, when the interest rates had ballooned to something impossible, they'd come to collect. Not money. Her. She remembered the night they'd appeared at her grandmother's apartment. 3 men in expensive suits, identical faces that could have been carved from stone, offering a solution. Marry them. Become part of their family. In exchange, all debts forgiven, her grandmother's medical care fully funded, a generous stipend for her family, and protection from the other criminal elements that had started circling once word got out she owed money to the Kims. You cannot be serious, Muna had said, standing in her small kitchen while rain pounded against the windows. This is insane. Marriage? To all 3 of you? That's not even legal. In Korea, no, Dae had agreed, his face impassive. But there are places. And what we want, we get. The legality is flexible when you have our resources. I won't do it. I won't be some trophy or possession. Min had smiled then, and it was the most dangerous expression she'd ever seen on a human face. Then your grandmother dies. The other loan sharks will come. Your friend Amara, the one who recommended our services, she has debts too. Her family is much less forgiving than ours. Without our protection, I give her 3 months before something very unfortunate happens. The thread had been clear, wrapped in silk but hard as diamonds underneath. Agree, or watch everyone she loved suffer. It wasn't really a choice at all. Now, trapped in their penthouse, their hands on her body, Muna felt the full weight of what she'd agreed to crashing down on her. The ceremony had been small, private, conducted in a country where enough money could make any paperwork appear legal. She'd worn white because they'd insisted, though she'd felt like she was attending her own funeral rather than her wedding. Her grandmother had cried on the video call, thinking they were tears of joy, not understanding that her granddaughter had just sold herself to save her life. I need you to let me go, Muna said again, forcing her voice steady. Now. Or what? Dae challenged, moving closer. You'll run? Where would you go, Muna? Back to Nairobi? We own your grandmother's hospital. We own the building she lives in. We own the airline you'd fly on. There is nowhere you can run that we won't find you. The truth of his words was suffocating. She'd known from the moment she'd agreed that there was no escape, but hearing it stated so bluntly made it real in a way that stole her breath. Min stood, brushing off his knees, the glass now collected in a small pile he'd set on a side table. You're thinking of us as monsters, he observed, tilting his head as he studied her face. That's not entirely inaccurate, but it's not entirely fair either. We didn't create the situation. We're offering you a way out. You're offering me a cage, Muna shot back, finally finding her anger beneath the fear. A golden cage, maybe, but still a cage. Jin's arms tightened around her waist. Would you prefer the alternative? Because we can arrange that. Release you from our agreement. Forgive the debt. Send you home. His voice dropped lower, darker. But the others won't be so generous. The Huang family has been eyeing your case with interest. They prefer their methods more, hands-on. I've seen what they do to young women who owe them money. You wouldn't last a week. Muna closed her eyes, hating them. Hating herself more. Because he was right. The world they operated in didn't forgive weakness or debt. She'd made a deal with devils, but they were devils who offered protection from worse demons. Why me? She asked, opening her eyes to meet Dae's gaze. Of all the women in the world, why did you want me? Was it just the debt? Could have been anyone? Something flickered in Dae's expression, too quick to name. Do you really want to know? Yes. He reached out, his fingers trailing along her jawline with surprising gentleness. Because you're fire wrapped in velvet. Because when we first saw you at the hospital, arguing with that doctor about your grandmother's care, you looked ready to tear the world apart with your bare hands. Because you're beautiful and fierce and intelligent, and we're tired of women who only see our money or fear our name. You see us as men. Dangerous men, yes, but men. Not myths. Not monsters. Men. The honesty in his voice caught her off guard. Muna had expected many things: lust, possession, cruelty. She hadn't expected vulnerability, however slight. I do see monsters, she whispered. Good, Jean said against her ear. Because that's what we are. But we're monsters who chose you, Muna. Who wanted you enough to offer this bargain. Who will kill anyone who tries to touch you. Who will burn the world down if it means keeping you safe. That's not romance, Muna said, her voice breaking. That's obsession. Min stepped closer, completing the circle around her. In our world, they're the same thing. The terrible part was that some traitorous part of her, some deep, hidden part she didn't want to acknowledge, responded to their words. She'd spent her whole life being invisible, ordinary, the good girl who studied hard and kept her head down. No one had ever looked at her the way the Kim triplets did, like she was something precious and dangerous, worth fighting for, worth killing for. It was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. I don't love you, she said, needing to establish that boundary. Any of you. Not yet, Day agreed. But you will. You can't force love. His smile was sharp enough to cut. We don't need to force anything. Time is on our side. You're ours for life, Muna. We have decades to make you fall. And we will. The confidence in his voice made her shiver. Before she could respond, he turned away, moving toward the bar in the corner of the room. But tonight isn't about love. Tonight is about sealing our agreement. Consummating our marriage. Muna's heart slammed against her ribs. No. All three of them looked at her, and the hunger in their eyes was unmistakable now. Not cruel, but intense. Wanting. It's traditional, Min said, his tone almost conversational. And necessary. The marriage isn't legal until it's consummated. Just paperwork otherwise. Find another wife, Muna said desperately. Someone who wants this. I'll stay here, play the part, but I won't. You will, Jean interrupted, finally releasing her waist. She stumbled forward, and Day caught her, steadying her with hands that were surprisingly gentle. Because that was the deal, Muna. Your body, your life, your loyalty. In exchange for everything we'd provided. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction. I'm not ready. You'll never be ready, Day said, but his voice had softened slightly. But we can make it easier. We're not cruel, despite what you think. We don't want to hurt you. Then don't do this. He cupped her face in both hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. I'm going to tell you something true, and I need you to listen carefully. What happens in this room tonight will happen. That's not negotiable. But how it happens, whether you fight us and we have to take what's ours, or whether you choose to come to us willingly, that's up to you. We would prefer willing. We would prefer you to want this, even a little. But either way, tonight you become ours completely. The choice he offered wasn't really a choice, and they both knew it. But there was something in his eyes, some hint of actual humanity, that made Muna pause. If I do this, she said slowly, if I agree to tonight, you swear on your family's honor that my grandmother will be taken care of? That her medical care continues? That my friend Amara and her family will be protected? I swear it, Day said immediately. On the Kim name, on my father's grave, on everything we built. Your people will be protected as if they were our own. Min and Jean nodded their agreement, and Muna could see the truth in their faces. Whatever else they were, the Kims honored their word. It was part of what made them so dangerous. When they promised something, they delivered. She took a shuddering breath, trying to find courage she didn't feel. Then pour me a drink first. A strong one. Day's expression softened into something that might have been respect. He released her face and moved to the bar, pouring amber liquid from a crystal decanter into a glass. When he returned, Muna took it with shaking hands and downed half the contents in one burning swallow. The whiskey, expensive, smooth, nothing like the cheap liquor she'd tried at university parties, spread warmth through her chest and belly. Dutch courage, her grandmother would have called it. False bravery from a bottle. But right now, Muna would take any courage she could find. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more captivating tales of love, danger, and unexpected romance. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Better? Jean asked, appearing at her side with a second glass. No, Muna admitted. But I don't think anything would make this better. Give us a chance, Min said, his voice surprisingly gentle. You might be surprised. Muna finished the first drink and accepted the second, sipping it more slowly. The alcohol was already making her head feel fuzzy, her fear slightly dulled. She studied the three men who now owned her life, really looked at them for the first time without the blind panic that had clouded her vision since the wedding. They were beautiful, she could admit that. Identical in feature but distinct in bearing, Day with his commanding presence, Min with his dangerous grace, Jean with his quiet intensity. They wore power like other men wore cologne, effortlessly, as if they'd been born to it. Which, she supposed, they had. Sons of a mafia empire, raised to rule through fear and money and calculated violence. And they wanted her. Not just any woman, but specifically her. For reasons she still didn't fully understand. Why triplets? She asked suddenly, the alcohol loosening her tongue. Why do you share everything? Surely you could each have your own wife, your own life. Day exchanged glances with his brothers, some silent communication passing between them. Our father had 3 sons, he said finally. He spent our entire childhood trying to decide which of us would inherit his empire. Played us against each other, encouraged competition, created division. It nearly destroyed us. The only way we survived was by refusing to play his game. We became a unit, indivisible. What one has, all have. No jealousy, no competition, no weakness. That sounds lonely, Muna observed. It was, Min admitted. Until we decided to find a wife who could belong to all of us. Someone who could be shared without creating the divisions our father tried to force. Someone strong enough to handle all 3 of us. And you thought I was that person? A nursing student from Nairobi who can barely pay her rent? Strength isn't about money, Jean said. It's about will. And you have more will than anyone we've ever met. You walked into our office to negotiate your debt like a queen entering her throne room. No fear. Just determination to protect your family. That's the kind of strength we need. Muna shook her head, draining the second glass. The room was definitely starting to spin now, but in a pleasant way. The sharp edges of her fear were softening into something more manageable. You're crazy. All 3 of you. Probably, Day agreed. But you're crazy now. For better or worse. He reached out, offering his hand. Not grabbing, not demanding. Offering. Giving her the illusion of choice even though they both knew the outcome was predetermined. Muna stared at his hand for a long moment, this final threshold. Everything before this moment could still be undone, walked back, explained away. But if she took his hand, if she crossed this line, there would be no returning to who she'd been. The innocent nursing student from Nairobi would cease to exist, replaced by someone new. Someone harder. Someone who belonged to the Korean mafia. My grandmother would be so disappointed in me, she whispered. Your grandmother will live a long, comfortable life because of the choice you're making right now, Min countered. That's not something to be ashamed of. Maybe he was right. Maybe sacrificing yourself for family wasn't weakness but the strongest thing a person could do. Muna had seen her grandmother make countless sacrifices over the years, working extra shifts to pay for Muna's schooling, going without so Muna could have more, choosing her granddaughter's future over her own comfort every single time. Maybe this was just Muna's turn to be strong. She placed her hand in Day's. His fingers closed around hers, warm and firm, and he pulled her gently toward the massive bed that dominated one side of the penthouse suite. Her heart was hammering so hard she could hear it in her ears, but she didn't pull away. Didn't fight. She'd made her choice. The bed was obscenely luxurious, piled with pillows and covered in silk sheets that probably cost more than a car. Day sat on the edge and pulled her to stand between his knees, his hands resting lightly on her hips. This close, she could smell his cologne, something expensive and dark that made her head spin worse than the alcohol. "We're going to take this slow," he said, looking up at her. "I know you're afraid. But I promise you, we know how to make this good. Trust us." "I don't trust you," Muna said honestly. "Then trust that we have no interest in hurting you. A willing wife is much more valuable than a broken one." It wasn't romantic, but it was honest. And somehow, that honesty made it easier. These men weren't pretending to be something they weren't. They were predators who'd caught their prey, but they were predators who wanted their prey intact and eventually willing. Day's hands slid up her sides, his thumbs brushing the underside of her breasts through the thin silk of her nightgown. Muna gasped at the sensation, her body responding even as her mind screamed warnings. She'd never been touched like this before, had never let anyone past the careful boundaries she'd maintained her whole life. She'd been too busy studying, too focused on her future, too aware of the risks to waste time on boys who couldn't offer her anything real. Now 3 men who offered her everything except freedom were about to discover just how inexperienced she really was. "You're shaking," Min observed, moving to stand behind her. His hands settled on her shoulders, thumbs pressing into the tense muscles of her neck. "Breathe, Muna. Just breathe." She tried to follow his instruction, drawing in a shaky breath and letting it out slowly. Jean appeared on her other side, his fingers tangling gently in her short curls, and she was surrounded by them again. But this time it felt different. Less threatening. Almost protective, in a twisted way. "So beautiful," Jean murmured, his breath warm against her temple. "Do you have any idea what you do to us? How long we've waited for this?" 3 days, Muna said, trying for sarcasm. "You've waited 3 whole days since the wedding." Day laughed, the sound genuine and unexpectedly warm. "Try 6 months. Since the first time we saw you in that hospital corridor, refusing to back down to that pompous doctor. We've been patient. But tonight, our patience ends." His hands found the hem of her nightgown, and slowly, so slowly it was almost torture, he began to lift it. Muna's hand shot down to stop him, instinct overriding acceptance, but Min caught her wrists gently. "Let him," Min said softly. "You agreed, remember? No more running." Muna squeezed her eyes shut, unable to watch as Day continued pulling the silk up and over her head. The cool air of the penthouse hit her newly exposed skin, and she fought the urge to cover herself. She was completely naked now, vulnerable in a way she'd never been before, while they remained fully clothed. The power imbalance was deliberate, she realized. A reminder of who controlled this situation. "Eyes open," Day commanded. "Look at me, Muna." She forced her eyes open, meeting his gaze. The hunger there should have terrified her, but there was something else mixed in. Awe, maybe. Genuine appreciation. "Perfect," he breathed. "Absolutely perfect." His hands traced up her sides, over her waist, cupping her breasts with a reverence that surprised her. When his thumbs brushed over her nipples, the sensation shot straight through her body, and she couldn't suppress the small sound that escaped her throat. All 3 of them smiled at that sound, predatory and pleased. "She's responsive," Jean observed, his own hands sliding down her arms, exploring. "This is going to be fun." Muna wanted to snap at him, to maintain some dignity, but Day chose that moment to lower his head and take one of her nipples into his mouth. The wet heat of it, the gentle suction, the occasional graze of teeth, it overwhelmed every thought in her head. Her hands, still caught in Min's grip, clenched into fists as pleasure radiated out from where Day's mouth worked. "That's it," Min encouraged, his voice low and rough. "Let yourself feel it. Stop fighting." But fighting was all Muna knew how to do. She'd fought her whole life, fought poverty, fought for her education, fought to keep her grandmother alive. Surrender wasn't in her vocabulary. Even now, even as her body betrayed her with its responses, some part of her was still resisting. Day released her nipple with a soft pop and looked up at her with dark, knowing eyes. "You're still thinking too much. We need to fix that." Before she could ask what he meant, he stood and scooped her up, laying her out on the bed like an offering. The silk sheets were cool against her heated skin, and she instinctively tried to close her legs, to preserve some modesty. But Jean was there immediately, his hands on her knees, gently but firmly pressing them apart. "No hiding," he said. "We want to see all of you." Muna turned her face away, unable to watch as they looked at her most intimate places. She could feel their eyes on her, studying, appreciating, claiming. It was too much, too intense, too overwhelming. Then Day was there, cupping her face and turning it back toward him. "Stay with us. No checking out, no disappearing into your head. Be present, Muna. Be here with us." "I don't know how," she admitted, her voice small. "Then we'll teach you." What followed was a lesson in sensation unlike anything Muna had ever imagined. 3 pairs of hands explored every inch of her body, learning what made her gasp, what made her moan, what made her arch into their touch despite her determination to remain unmoved. They worked within coordination that spoke of years together, passing her between them like a precious treasure, each taking their turn to discover her secrets. Min's mouth found sensitive spots behind her ears, along her collarbone, in the hollow of her throat. Jin's hands mapped the curve of her waist, the swell of her hips, the softness of her inner thighs. And Day seemed determined to kiss every inch of her, starting at her forehead and working methodically downward until Muna was writhing beneath him, need overriding shame. When his mouth finally reached the apex of her thighs, Muna nearly came off the bed. The sensation was so foreign, so intense, so impossibly good that she couldn't process it. Her hands tangled in his hair, when had they been released, and she didn't know if she was trying to pull him closer or push him away. "Easy," Min soothed, holding her down with gentle pressure on her hips. "Let him work. He's very good at this." The embarrassment of them talking about her like this, so clinically while doing something so intimate, should have killed any arousal she felt. Instead, it somehow made it worse. Better. She didn't understand her own reactions anymore. Day's tongue did things that should have been illegal, building pleasure inside her that climbed higher and higher until Muna thought she might actually die from it. Just when she was certain she couldn't take any more, when the pressure was unbearable, he pulled back. "Not yet," he said, his lips glistening in the low light. "When you come for the first time, it's going to be with one of us inside you. Sealing the bond completely." Muna whimpered, actually whimpered, at the loss of sensation. She'd never felt anything like that before, hadn't known her body was capable of such intense feeling. And now they were denying her the release she desperately needed. "Please," she heard herself say, the word escaping before she could stop it. All 3 of them smiled, and Muna realized she'd just given them exactly what they wanted. Her surrender. Her pleading. Her need. "Since you asked so nicely," Day said, beginning to unbutton his shirt. Muna watched, transfixed, as he revealed the body underneath, all lean muscle and old scars, the body of someone who'd fought for survival and won. Min and Jean were undressing too, and she couldn't look away from the revelation of their identical forms. Beautiful and dangerous and soon to be intimately familiar. Reality crashed back in when Day settled between her thighs, his considerable weight supported on his forearms. This was really happening. No more delays, no more gradual building. This was the moment everything changed forever. "Look at me," Day commanded, and Muna obeyed. "I need to know you're still with us. Still choosing this." Was she choosing it? Or just accepting the inevitable? Muna didn't know anymore. The line between consent and coercion had blurred beyond recognition. But she nodded anyway, because what else could she do? "Say it," he insisted. "I need to hear you say yes." "Yes," Muna whispered. Then, stronger, "yes." The word was barely out of her mouth before he was pressing forward, breaching her entrance with careful but insistent pressure. The pain was immediate and sharp, making Muna cry out. She tried to push him away, but Min and Jean were there, holding her hands, murmuring soothing words she couldn't quite hear over the roaring in her ears. "Breathe through it," Day gritted out, and she could hear the strain in his voice, the effort it took him to go slowly. "It will pass. I promise it will pass." He was right. As her body adjusted to the intrusion, the pain faded to discomfort, and then to something that wasn't entirely unpleasant. When he was finally fully seated inside her, they both stilled, adjusting to the new reality of their joining. "Okay?" Day asked, searching her face. Muna nodded, not trusting her voice. She felt full, stretched, claimed in the most primal way possible. And underneath the lingering discomfort was something else. Something that felt almost like completion, though she hated herself for thinking it. Day began to move, slowly at first, then with increasing confidence as Muna's body accommodated him. The discomfort faded entirely, replaced by building pleasure that made her gasp. This was nothing like what she'd imagined her first time would be, no romantic candlelight, no sweet words of love, no gentle boyfriend who'd wait until she was ready. This was raw and primal and overwhelming, and her body was responding despite every objection her mind could raise. Min and Jean weren't idle observers. Their hands and mouths continued exploring, adding layers of sensation that pushed Muna closer and closer to some edge she'd never approached before. When Day's thumb found this sensitive bundle of nerves at her apex, combining with the relentless rhythm of his thrusts, Muna shattered. The orgasm ripped through her like lightning, making her cry out, her body arching off the bed as pleasure overwhelmed every sense. She was dimly aware of Day following her over the edge, his own release hot inside her, marking her in the most permanent way possible. When she finally came back to herself, she was cradled in someone's arms, Min's, she thought, though her vision was still blurry. Day had withdrawn, and she could feel the evidence of their joining trickling down her thighs. The reality of what had just happened crashed over her, and she started to shake. "You did beautifully," Jean said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "So brave. So perfect." Muna didn't feel brave. She felt shattered, broken open, fundamentally changed. But underneath the shock was something she didn't want to acknowledge, satisfaction. Her body felt languid, satisfied in a way she'd never experienced. The pleasure had been real, undeniable, and that somehow made everything worse. "We're not done," Min reminded her gently, and Muna's eyes flew open wide. "What?" "You belong to all of us," he said, already positioning himself between her legs. That was Day's turn. "Now it's mine." Horror and anticipation warred in Muna's chest. I can't do that again." "You can," Min assured her, his hands already rekindling the fire Day had started. "And you will. Your body knows what to expect now. It will be easier." He was right, and Muna hated him for it. When he entered her, there was no pain, just a fullness that her body now recognized and accepted. He moved differently than Day, slower, more deliberate, drawing out each sensation until Muna was writhing beneath him, chasing another release she shouldn't want but desperately needed. This time, when she came, it was slower, deeper, rolling through her body like waves instead of lightning. Min followed her almost immediately, and then it was Jin's turn. By the time the youngest triplet had claimed her as well, Muna was beyond thought, beyond resistance, beyond anything except sensation. She existed in a haze of pleasure and exhaustion, her body wrung out and satisfied despite every objection her mind tried to raise. When it was finally over, when all three of them had marked her as theirs, they arranged themselves around her like a protective barrier between her and the rest of the world. Day on her left, Min on her right, Jean at her back. Surrounded. Possessed. Claimed. "Sleep," Day murmured against her ear. "Tomorrow we start your new life. But tonight, just rest." Muna wanted to fight sleep, wanted to process what had happened, wanted to hold on to some piece of her old self. But exhaustion pulled her under like a tide, and she surrendered to it the way she'd surrendered to everything else tonight. When she woke, hours later, dawn was painting the Seoul skyline in shades of pink and gold. The triplets were still asleep around her, their breathing synchronized in a way that was probably unconscious. In the soft morning light, they looked less like predators and more like what they were, men, beautiful and flawed and dangerous, but still fundamentally human. Muna carefully extracted herself from their embrace and moved to the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city. Seoul stretched out before her, glittering and vast, a metropolis that operated according to rules she was only beginning to understand. This was her home now. This penthouse, this city, these men. Everything she'd known before was gone, left behind in Nairobi along with the girl she used to be. She pressed her palm against the cool glass and tried to recognize her reflection. Same face, same body, but somehow completely different. The girl who'd walked into this penthouse last night had been afraid but innocent. The woman staring back at her now was neither. Having regrets? Jin's voice came from behind her, and Muna startled. She hadn't heard him wake, hadn't sensed him approaching. He moved like a ghost, this youngest triplet, and she would need to remember that. Would it matter if I was? She asked. He considered the question seriously as he came to stand beside her, also naked, apparently unconcerned with modesty. Probably not. But I'd still like to know. Muna thought about it, really examined her feelings in the cold light of day. I don't know what I feel. Everything is too mixed up. Angry, scared, satisfied, ashamed, confused. All of it at once. That's honest at least. What's the point in lying? You own me now. You might as well know what you've bought. Jin turned to face her, his expression unreadable. We didn't buy you, Muna. We rescued you. There's a difference. Is there? Because from where I'm standing, it feels the same. Then maybe you need to adjust your perspective. He gestured at the city spread out before them. Out there, you have enemies you don't even know exist. People who would hurt you just for owing money. People who would use you and discard you without a second thought. In here, with us, you're protected. Valued. Yes, we demanded something in return, but what we're offering is worth more than what we've taken. My freedom? Muna challenged. Your freedom was already gone the moment you signed that loan agreement, Jin said bluntly. You just didn't know it yet. We gave you a softer landing than you would have gotten anywhere else. The terrible thing was, he might be right. Muna had heard stories about the other loan sharks in Nairobi, the ones who broke fingers and burned homes and sold girls to brothels in foreign countries. Compared to that, becoming the wife of 3 wealthy, powerful men who at least seemed to care about her pleasure, it could have been so much worse. I'm supposed to be grateful then, she asked, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. Eventually, maybe. Right now, I'd settle for you not trying to jump out that window. Muna laughed, the sound harsh and humorless. Would you stop me if I tried? Yes. But I'd prefer not to have to. Jin reached out, tucking a curl behind her ear with surprising gentleness. You're ours now, Muna. That means we protect you, even from yourself. It means we care about your well-being, your happiness, your future. It means you matter. To who? 3 gangsters who wanted a trophy? His eyes flashed with something dark. Is that what you think? That this is about ego? About having something pretty to display? Isn't it? Jin grabbed her hand and pressed it against his chest, right over his heart. She could feel it beating, fast and hard, very much alive. Does that feel like someone who sees you as a trophy? We've each had countless women throw themselves at us. Models, actresses, heiresses, women who would have done anything to be in your position. We didn't want any of them. We wanted you. Why? Muna demanded, the question that had been burning in her chest since this all began finally exploding out. Why me? I'm nobody. I'm just a broke student with a dying grandmother. What could you possibly want from me that you couldn't get from someone who actually wanted to be here? Jin was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes searching her face. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than she'd ever heard it. Because you're real. Because when we walked into that hospital and heard you threatening to report that doctor to every medical board in Kenya if he didn't give your grandmother proper care, we saw someone who fights. Someone who doesn't back down. Someone who loves so fiercely she'd sacrifice everything for family. He paused, his thumb tracing circles on the back of her hand. We were raised in a world of lies and manipulation, Muna. Everyone wants something, everyone has an angle. But you? You're honest even when it would benefit you to lie. You negotiated for your grandmother's care before your own safety. You walked into our office and told us exactly what you thought of us, consequences be damned. That kind of authenticity is rarer than diamonds in our world. Muna felt tears burning behind her eyes. So you decided to lock me in a cage to keep me authentic? Don't you see how that's contradictory? We're not trying to cage you, Jean insisted. We're trying to give you a foundation. Security. Protection. Space to become whoever you want to be without fear. By taking away my choices. By taking away bad choices. Dangerous choices. He released her hand and turned back to the window. You think we're the villains in this story. Maybe we are. But sometimes villains are just people making hard decisions in a world that doesn't offer good options. Before Muna could respond, Day's voice cut through the morning air. Philosophical before coffee, Jean? That's unlike you. Both of them turned to see Day approaching, already dressed in perfectly pressed slacks and a white shirt, looking like he'd stepped out of a magazine rather than out of bed after a night of. Muna's brain refused to finish that thought. Our wife needed reminding of her value, Jean said simply. Wife. The word still sounded foreign in Muna's ears. I can't believe that's what I am now. Mrs. Kim. Except I'm Mrs. Kim 3 times over, which doesn't even make sense. You're Mrs. Kim once, Day corrected, handing her a silk robe that she gratefully wrapped around herself. We all share the same name, the same identity in many ways. You're not married to 3 different men. You're married to one entity that happens to exist in 3 bodies. That's a disturbing way to put it. But accurate. Min joined them, also dressed, carrying a tray with coffee and what looked like breakfast pastries. We've spent our entire lives learning to function as a unit. Where one goes, all go. What one knows, all know. Who one loves, all love. He set the tray on a nearby table and poured coffee into delicate cups. You'll learn our rhythms eventually. How Day leads but listens to counsel. How Jean observes everything and forgets nothing. How I handle the details they might miss. We complement each other. And now you're part of that dynamic. Muna accepted the coffee cup he offered, grateful for something to do with her hands. I don't know how to be part of a unit. I'm used to being alone. Not anymore, Day said firmly. From now on, you're never alone. One of us will always be nearby. For protection, yes, but also because we want to be. We want to know you, Muna. Really know you. Your favorite foods, your dreams, what makes you laugh, what keeps you up at night. So you can use it against me? The words came out more bitter than she'd intended, but none of them looked offended. Instead, Day nodded slowly. I understand why you'd think that. In your position, I'd be paranoid too. But I'm going to prove you wrong. Starting today. He pulled out his phone and made a quick call in rapid Korean. Muna caught a few words. She'd been trying to learn the language through apps for months, knowing she might end up in Seoul eventually, but not enough to understand the full conversation. When he hung up, he was smiling. I've just arranged for your grandmother to be moved to a private room with round-the-clock nursing care. The best doctors in Nairobi will consult on her case. She'll also receive a monthly stipend, enough to live comfortably for the rest of her life. Muna's breath caught. Why? Because she's important to you. Which makes her important to us. Because keeping our promises is how we operate. And because, he moved closer, tilting her chin up to meet his eyes, because we need you to understand that we're not your enemies. We're on your side, Muna. Always. The sincerity in his voice made something crack in her chest. She'd been so focused on what they'd taken from her that she hadn't really processed what they were giving. Not just money or protection, but care. Actual, tangible care for the person she loved most in the world. I don't know how to thank you, she whispered. You don't have to thank us. You're family now. We take care of family. Min squeezed her shoulder gently. Now drink your coffee before it gets cold, and then we need to talk about your schedule. My schedule? Did you think you'd just sit in this penthouse all day? Jean asked, amusement coloring his tone. You have a life to build, Muna. A life here with us. Over breakfast, which was far more elaborate than the coffee and pastries she'd initially seen, with staff appearing to deliver fresh fruit, eggs, rice, and various Korean dishes she couldn't name, they outlined their expectations. You'll continue your nursing education, Day said, pulling up something on a tablet. Seoul National University has one of the best nursing programs in Asia. I've arranged for your transfer. You'll start next semester. Muna nearly choked on her coffee. You want me to go to school? Why wouldn't we? Min asked, looking genuinely confused. You were a student when we met you. Did you think we'd take that away? I don't know what I thought. That you'd want me here, available, waiting for you. All three of them laughed, and Jean shook his head. We're busy men, Muna. We run multiple businesses, most of them legitimate, some of them less so. We're not going to be here all day demanding your attention. We want you to have your own life, your own interests, your own achievements. Besides, Day added, a wife who can actually hold a conversation about something other than shopping and gossip is far more valuable to us. Your intelligence is one of the things that attracted us in the first place. We're not going to waste that. Muna sat back, trying to process this new information. They wanted her to finish her education. They were supporting her grandmother. They'd given her wealth and protection and apparently freedom to pursue her own goals. It was more than she'd expected. More than she'd dared hope for. What's the catch? She asked suspiciously. No catch, Min said. Though you will have a security detail when you're on campus. Non-negotiable. Too many people would love to get their hands on a Kim wife, and we're not taking any chances with your safety. A security detail. Like bodyguards? Discreet ones, Jean assured her. You probably won't even notice them most of the time. But yes, you'll be protected whenever you leave this building. It should have felt oppressive, but instead Muna found herself oddly relieved. The world these men operated in was dangerous, and she was woefully unprepared to navigate it alone. Having protection actually made sense. Okay, she said slowly. University, security detail. What else? Korean lessons, Day said. You'll need to be fluent to really thrive here. I've hired a tutor who'll come 3 times a week. You can also practice with us, we'll speak Korean at home to help you learn faster. Etiquette training, Min added. You'll be attending events with us, meeting important people. You need to know how to handle yourself in those situations. Self-defense classes, Jean finished. Because security detail or not, you should be able to protect yourself if something goes wrong. Muna's head was spinning. This all sounds very structured. We believe in preparation, Day said. The better equipped you are to handle our world, the safer you'll be. And the safer you are, the better we sleep at night. You care about sleeping well? We care about you, Min corrected. Which yes, affects how well we sleep. Call it selfish if you want, but your well-being is tied to ours now. Before Muna could respond, her phone, which she hadn't seen since the wedding, appeared on the table. Day pushed it toward her. Call your grandmother. Let her know you're safe. She's been worried. Muna grabbed the phone like a lifeline, her fingers trembling slightly as she dialed the familiar number. It rang twice before her grandmother's voice came through, stronger than it had sounded in months. Muna? Muna, is that you? Bibi, Muna breathed, using the Swahili word for grandmother. Yes, it's me. How are you? How are you feeling? Better than I have in years, child. Whatever you did, whatever arrangement you made with those Korean men, the doctors came this morning. Real doctors, good ones. They're talking about treatments, about physical therapy, about hope. Muna, what did you do? Tears spilled down Muna's cheeks. I did what needed to be done, Bibi. I'm safe, I promise. And you're going to be taken care of. Everything is going to be okay. Are they treating you well? These husbands of yours? Muna glanced at the 3 men watching her with varying expressions of concern and satisfaction. Yes, Bibi. They're treating me well. It wasn't a lie, exactly. They were treating her well, by their standards. They'd kept their promises, given her more than she'd expected, shown her pleasure she didn't know existed. That it had all come at the cost of her freedom was beside the point. They talked for a few more minutes, her grandmother's voice growing stronger and more hopeful with each word. When they finally hung up, Muna was crying in earnest, overwhelmed by relief and grief and too many emotions to name. Min pulled her into his arms, letting her cry against his shoulder while he murmured soothing words in Korean. She didn't understand most of them, but the tone was enough. Comforting. Protective. Almost loving, if she allowed herself to believe in such things. She sounds good, Day observed when Muna's tears finally subsided. The treatments are already making a difference. Thank you, Muna managed, her voice thick. I know I'm supposed to hate you, but thank you for this. For her. You don't have to hate us, Jean said quietly. I know that's how you feel now, but it doesn't have to stay that way forever. Give us time, Muna. Let us prove that this can be good. Different than you planned, yes. But still good. Muna pulled away from Min, wiping her eyes. I don't know if I can do that. Trust you, I mean. Want this? Then don't trust us yet, Day said pragmatically. Just stay. See what life looks like here. Make your judgments based on reality rather than fear. That's all we ask. It was a reasonable request, and Muna found herself nodding. She couldn't escape even if she wanted to, that much had been made crystal clear. But maybe, just maybe, she could find a way to survive this. To build something like a life within the boundaries they'd established. I need to shower, she said, suddenly aware of how she must look, tear-stained, hair a mess, still wearing only the robe. And clothes. I need actual clothes. Your wardrobe is already filled, Min told her, gesturing toward a door she hadn't explored yet. We had a stylist put together a selection based on your measurements from the wedding dress. If you don't like anything, we can bring in more options. Of course they'd already done that. They seemed to have thought of everything, planned for every contingency. It was both impressive and unsettling. Muna excused herself and found the bathroom, which was larger than her entire apartment back in Nairobi, all marble and gold fixtures and a bathtub that could comfortably fit 4 people. She tried not to think about why it was that large. The shower was hot and powerful, washing away the physical evidence of the night before if not the memory. Muna stood under the spray for a long time, trying to reconcile who she'd been with who she was becoming. The old Muna wouldn't have survived in this world. She'd been too soft, too naive, too trusting. This new version needed to be harder. Smarter. More strategic. If she was going to be trapped in this marriage, she might as well make it work for her. Use their resources, finish her education, secure her family's future. And maybe, eventually, find a way to carve out some autonomy within the boundaries they'd set. When she emerged, wrapped in a towel, she found clothes laid out on the bed, expensive but practical, dark jeans and a soft sweater that looked more like something she'd choose than the silk nightgown from before. Someone had been paying attention. She dressed quickly and returned to the main living area to find only Jean waiting. The others had business to handle, he explained. I'm your designated keeper for today. Keeper. That's a charming way to put it. He smiled, unoffended. Would you prefer companion? Guard? Husband enjoying his wife's company? How about person who won't let me leave? That too, he acknowledged. But I thought we could make the most of it. Seoul is an incredible city. I'd like to show it to you. Muna hesitated. Part of her wanted to refuse, to stay locked in this penthouse and avoid engaging with her new reality. But a larger part was desperately curious about the city that was now her home. Fine, she said. Show me Seoul. If you're still with us, make sure to hit that subscribe button. We're just getting to the good part, and you won't want to miss how Muna's story unfolds in this dangerous new world. Jin's smile widened into something genuine and pleased. Get your coat. It's cold outside. The next few hours were surreal. They were driven through Seoul in a luxury car with tinted windows, a second vehicle following with the promised security detail. Jean narrated the city like a proud parent, pointing out landmarks, explaining history, showing her both the glittering modern districts and the traditional neighborhoods that had survived centuries of change. This is Bukshin Hanok Village, he said as they walked through streets lined with traditional Korean houses. It's been preserved since the Joseon dynasty. I used to come here as a kid when I needed to think. Did you have a lot to think about as a child? Muna asked, genuinely curious. His expression darkened slightly. More than any child should. Our father believed in preparing us early for the realities of our world. We saw things, learned things, did things that most people never have to face. That sounds terrible. It was, Jean admitted. But it made us strong. Made us survivors. And eventually it made us brothers in the truest sense, not just by blood but by choice. We protected each other when no one else would. Muna studied his profile, seeing past the polished exterior to the scarred child underneath. These men were products of violence and survival, shaped by a world she was only beginning to understand. It didn't excuse what they'd done to her, but it provided context. I'm sorry you had to go through that, she said softly. Jean looked surprised. Why? It's not your fault. I know. But I can still be sorry it happened. Empathy doesn't require responsibility. He studied her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. You're remarkable, you know that? Most people in your position would be focused entirely on their own suffering. But here you are, offering compassion to your captors. You're not my captors, Muna said slowly, working through the thought as she spoke. You're my husbands. Husbands I didn't choose and don't particularly like yet, but still. There's a difference. Is there? I'm trying to decide. They continued walking, the cold winter air biting at Muna's cheeks. Around them, tourists and locals alike moved through the historic streets, taking photos, laughing, living normal lives. Muna envied them their simplicity. Tell me about your family, Jean said eventually. Not just your grandmother. Your parents, your childhood. I want to know who you were before us. It was a reasonable request, and Muna found herself talking. About her mother who'd died in childbirth, complications that could have been prevented with better healthcare. About her father who disappeared before she was born, a man her mother had loved but who couldn't handle the responsibility of family. About being raised by her grandmother, a fierce woman who'd worked 3 jobs to keep them fed and housed and educated. She never complained, Muna said, her voice thick with emotion. Not once. Even when she was exhausted, even when we barely had anything, she'd say we were blessed. That we had each other, and that was enough. She sounds like where you get your strength from. She is. Everything good in me comes from her. Jean reached out, taking her hand in his. The gesture was comfortable, almost casual, and Muna didn't pull away. Then we're taking care of her the way she took care of you. Circle of life, or whatever the saying is. They spent the rest of the day exploring Seoul, visiting markets, eating street food that Jean insisted she try, stopping at a traditional tea house where they sat on cushions and drank tea that cost more per cup than Muna used to spend on groceries for a week. With each hour, Muna felt herself relaxing slightly, the rigid fear in her spine easing into something more manageable. Jean was easy to be around when he wasn't being threatening. He had a dry sense of humor, an encyclopedic knowledge of Korean history, and a surprising gentleness in how he treated her. He never pushed, never demanded, just existed beside her like this was normal. Like they were a real couple on a real date instead of a captor showing his captive around her new prison city. As the sun began to set, painting the city in shades of orange and pink, they stopped at a viewpoint overlooking Seoul. The city sprawled below them, millions of lights beginning to flicker on as darkness fell. It's beautiful, Muna admitted. It's yours now, Jean said. All of it. Everything we have, everything we are, it belongs to you as much as it belongs to us. That's not how ownership works. Isn't it? In our world, family is everything. Your family now. That means what's ours is yours. The money, the power, the protection. All of it. Muna turned to face him fully. And what do I owe in return? Besides the obvious? Jean considered the question seriously. Loyalty. Honesty. Your presence. And eventually, if we earn it, your trust and maybe even your affection. We're not asking for love, not yet. But we hope you'll get there someday. That's a lot to ask from someone you forced into this. It is, he agreed. But we have time. Years and years of time. And we're patient men when it matters. They drove back to the penthouse as night fell completely over Seoul. Muna was exhausted, physically and emotionally drained from the day's revelations and experiences. When they arrived, Dae and Min were already there, having finished whatever business had called them away. Dinner was another elaborate affair, this time with all four of them sitting around the table like a real family. They asked about her day, listened to her descriptions of the city, shared stories of their own childhood explorations of Seoul's hidden corners. It was almost normal. Almost comfortable. Until Dae set down his fork and looked at her with serious eyes. "We need to discuss something," he said. "Tomorrow night, there's an event. A party hosted by one of our business associates. Important people will be there, including some who would love to see the Kim family fail. You'll be attending with us." Muna's stomach dropped. "I don't think I'm ready for that." "Ready or not, it's necessary," Min said, not unkindly. "People need to see you, to know that we're united. Weakness in our world is an invitation to attack. And a wife who hides suggests weakness." "I'm not weak," Muna protested. "We know that," Dae assured her. "But they don't. So you need to show them. Walk in on our arms, head high, every inch the queen you are. Show them that the Kims are stronger than ever." "I don't know how to be a queen." "Then we'll teach you." Jean smiled. "Starting tomorrow morning. Etiquette training, remember? We're accelerating the schedule." Muna wanted to argue, to refuse, to demand more time. But she could see the determination in their faces. This wasn't a request. It was an order wrapped in gentle words. "Fine," she said, surrendering once again. "I'll do it. I'll be your perfect wife for the night." "Not perfect," Min corrected. "Real. Authentic. You. That's all we need." After dinner, Muna excused herself, retreating to the bedroom that was supposedly hers but felt more like a beautiful cage. She stood at the window again, staring out at the city lights, trying to find her center. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called, expecting one of the triplets. Instead, all three of them entered, still dressed but with a casual air that suggested the business day was truly over. "We wanted to check on you," Dae said. "Today was a lot. Tomorrow will be more." "I'm fine," Muna lied. "You're overwhelmed and scared and probably reconsidering every decision that led you to this moment," Min said bluntly. "But you're holding it together remarkably well." "Do I have a choice?" "There's always a choice," Jean said. "The choices aren't always good ones, but they exist." Muna turned to face them fully. "What happens if I can't do this? If I go to that party tomorrow and embarrass you? If I'm not strong enough to be what you need?" The three of them exchanged glances, that silent communication that still unnerved her. Then Dae stepped forward, cupping her face in his hands. "Then we handle it together. You're not alone in this, Muna. We're a team now, for better or worse. Your failures are our failures, and we protect our own. Even when we're the ones who put them in danger in the first place?" "Especially then," Min said, moving to stand beside his brother. "We know what we've asked of you. We know it's unfair and difficult and terrifying. But we also believe you can handle it. You're stronger than you think." Jean completed the circle, all three of them surrounding her again. But this time it didn't feel threatening. It felt protective. Supportive. Like they were building a wall between her and the world rather than trapping her inside one. "We should let you rest," Dae said, but he didn't move. None of them did. "Are you going to sleep here?" Muna asked. "All of you? Would you prefer we didn't?" Jean asked. Muna considered it. Part of her wanted solitude, space to process everything alone. But a larger part didn't want to be alone with her thoughts, didn't want to spend the night staring at the ceiling and spiraling into anxiety about tomorrow. "Stay," she heard herself say. "Please." The relief on their faces was obvious. They'd been prepared to give her space if she needed it, but they clearly preferred to be close. Muna was beginning to understand that about them, they functioned best as a unit, and having her separate felt wrong to them somehow. They prepared for bed with an efficiency that spoke of years of shared space. Muna changed in the bathroom, emerging in another silk nightgown, this one less revealing than the first, to find them already in bed, waiting for her. She slipped under the covers, and immediately they arranged themselves around her like before. "Tomorrow," Day murmured into the darkness, "we'll make you shine." "Tomorrow," Muna whispered back, "I'll try not to let you down." "Impossible," Min said from her other side. "You couldn't disappoint us if you tried." Muna closed her eyes, letting their warmth and presence ground her. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new fears, new tests of her strength. But tonight, surrounded by the men who'd irrevocably changed her life, she felt something unexpected. Not quite safe. Not quite happy. But not entirely alone either. And for now, that would have to be enough. As sleep pulled her under, her last thought was that maybe, just maybe, she could survive this. Survive them. And perhaps, eventually, even thrive in this strange new world they'd thrust her into. The story was far from over. In fact, it was only just beginning. Did this story keep you on the edge of your seat? Then you definitely need to subscribe to our channel right now. Drop a comment below telling us what you think about Muna's journey. Would you have made the same choices? And don't forget to hit that like button and share this with someone who loves intense romance stories. We've got more captivating tales coming your way, and you won't want to miss a single one. Until next time, keep believing that even in the darkest circumstances, we can find our own kind of light.